Howdy, y'all. Trace Johannesson here, live on the back patio on a Sunday afternoon, as we've been doing since the campaign started. Today, I'm grilling chicken thighs. And a lot of folks have asked me, how do you get the perfect grilled chicken thighs? And by a lot of folks, I mean, no one has asked me that. But I'm going to tell you anyway, while we wait for folks to show up. The trick to grilled chicken thighs, the first part is to salt the meat in advance. I learned this from Samin Nosrat, who wrote the book Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. And 1.25% salinity by weight effectively means for every pound of meat, you put about 6 grams of salt. So salt those chicken thighs. Then on a hot grill, you want to put them on the indirect side, skin side up. And the reason for this is because we're trying to render all the fat beneath the skin out so the skin can crisp up. So skin side up on indirect until about 185 degrees, which I know sounds very high, but around 180 or 190 is where the collagen and the connective tissue starts to break down. I have a thermometer with a probe that I use, and I set an alarm. So when it gets to 185, then I move to the last phase, and this is an important one. Then I go to the direct side of the grill on direct heat, and the skin side down until it's crispy. The important thing to note here is if you have a marinade that has sugar in it, the Maillard reaction will cause that skin to turn black and burn really quickly. So you probably want to minimize that, and you probably also want to watch carefully when the skin side is down. So that's enough cooking tips. I'm pretty sure no one's voting for me for my culinary skills, but it's certainly an option. But let's talk a little bit about today's topic, which is draining the swamp. And this is something I think many of us are interested in. But what does draining the swamp actually look like? What does that mean? Well, it's about 3 things: getting rid of career politicians, reining in our spending, and ensuring we have a government of the people that truly represent us. So let's kind of break these down one at a time. The first one, getting rid of career politicians. What are career politicians? What do they look like? I think we know what they are when we see them. These are folks who probably move around district to district in search of titles or roles, which is kind of a self-serving activity, in my humble opinion. Career politicians probably make backroom deals. They're always wheeling and dealing like a used car salesman, and they want your vote, not because they care or they believe that they've earned it, but because they want to make a deal. I hope that I earn your votes because you believe what I have to say, and you believe that I have what it takes to represent our district, and that you believe that I've earned it, not because I want to make some kind of deal in a back room. Kind of along with that, they're inauthentic. Career politicians, they tell you what you want to hear. I may not always have the perfect answer or the perfect response. I can be rough around the edges a little bit, and I might throw an accidental curse word in there. I'm a Marine, y'all, okay? I'm also a real human being. I make mistakes, but with me, what you see is what you get. And you don't have to vote for me, and you may not like me, but you will believe what I say, and you'll know why I think the way I do, because I'll tell you. So getting rid of career politicians, step 1. The second piece, reining in government spending. I say this when I go talk to groups all the time, and I say, we're up multiple trillions of dollars in the year 2020 in effectively credit card debt, in deficit spending with the federal government. And I ask the room, how many of y'all get to operate your households without a budget? In other words, how many of y'all get to spend at home more than you take in? And the answer is no one raises their hands, because we all have to live within a budget. Because what happens if we don't? We file for bankruptcy, or we have crippling credit card debt. Look, for the federal government to follow that same kind of mindset, we have to have a balanced budget. Am I saying that all government spending is bad? No, I'm not. The PPP was not inherently bad. It provided a need. The problem is in October, when that ends, we're going to have to live with those after effects. There are plenty of government services that don't have an end date. Radio Free Europe, founded around the Cold War time to fight communism in Europe, is still funded today. And that's one example of many, many government programs that just keep on going in perpetuity. We need to kind of put an end date on these spending programs, or at least have a success criteria that says once we're done with this, we're good to go, successful. We have limited resources. Like in federal government, our resources are limited by what we take in, which is tax revenue. The greater our deficit spending, the harder it is for small businesses to borrow. So let me say that again. The more long-term great deficit spending the federal government has, it affects us here on Main Street in that we as small businesses have a harder time getting loans for our small businesses to pay for our payroll, for our people to feed their families, because the government has taken up all of the available debt. That's how it impacts us on Main Street. And finally, we need to stop funding bureaucracies which no longer have our interests at heart. We need to fund the government spending that makes the most sense. And lastly, we need to return to a government of the people. What does that mean? I'm not saying that we have a lot of unelected bureaucrats in the federal government. Am I saying they're all bad? No, we need the Postal Service to operate. There are plenty of services that operate and great people who worked for many decades in faithful service to the government. There's some really great people, and they have inherited a broken institution. They provide services we need. Now, the flip side of that is we have other organizations like Congress who, when somebody decided who was essential and who was non-essential, decided that the federal government would still get paid. So what does that mean? The essential versus non-essential, these bureaucrats in Congress still got paid, okay? They stayed home safely. And what I mean by that is Nancy Pelosi decided not to have Congress come back to work to do their jobs, but did they have to worry about a paycheck? No, they still got paid. We, on Main Street, small businesses, were the ones who were affected and impacted because we were non-essential. As if working hard and paying your employees to feed their families is not essential. Coastal elites decided that. They didn't have anything at risk. They still got paid, and they still haven't come back to work. If we keep moving with this elitist class, it'll be like the Soviet Union. You'll have a group of party elite who is nothing like the people. The socialists, or in the Soviet Union, the Politburo, they never had to wait in bread lines. They lived like billionaires. And the choices they made affected the people living in the bread lines. So we need to make sure we have government of the people. So drain the swamp, get rid of the career politicians, guys like us, folks like us who are not ladder climbing politicians, not fancy lawyers, not looking for making the next backroom deal. People that are like us, that are authentic, that say the wrong thing once in a while and don't have the perfect answer and aren't perfect. With that being said, we got a question here from Chuck Leblo. Chuck says, I wonder how many government workers got stimulus checks and never lost their paychecks. That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that, but it does go back to the point I made earlier about there are several folks in our government who did not feel the effects of having to close businesses. They still got paid, and that's certainly a problem. Other than that, this week, we have a couple of things coming up. I made a video, if you didn't see it, on, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, kind of condemning the Houston mayor for making a fear-based decision to close or not allow the state Republican Party convention in Houston. Apparently, it's okay for tens of thousands of protesters and rioters to flood the streets, but when 6,000 Republicans want to have an event where we have a laundry list of safety protocols we're following, that's not okay. It's awfully convenient that the Democrat mayor canceled it a week before the event, knowing that effectively it's impossible to get all the logistics to have an alternative location. So I think that's partisan politics at its worst, and at best, it's fear-based leadership and decision-making. Other than that, folks, have a great weekend. Try those chicken thighs and let me know how they turn out, and we'll talk to you soon. Trace4texas.com. Thank you so much.